You are currently staring at a silent screen, your mind spiraling into 1,000 anxious questions, wondering exactly what you did to make him suddenly pull away. You feel that familiar, sharp sting of abandonment, desperately convincing yourself he is simply overwhelmed at work or figuring out his feelings. But let me offer you a rather brutal, yet entirely liberating truth. He isn't ghosting you, my dear. He is actively conditioning you. He is meticulously training your nervous system to survive on the absolute bare minimum. It sounds utterly maddening, I know, but the great paradox of male psychology is this: sometimes ignoring him completely is the absolute only way to finally make him hear you. In the next few minutes, I am going to expose exactly how this insidious psychological trap works and hand you the precise, counterintuitive protocol to instantly dismantle his game, reclaim your absolute power, and force him to step up. Put your tea down and pay very close attention. Let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? You are sitting there, staring at a screen that refuses to light up, convincing yourself that he is simply swamped at work, navigating a profound existential crisis, or just terribly confused. It is a rather comforting narrative, isn't it? It allows you to wrap his absence in a warm blanket of excuses rather than face the biting cold of reality. But darling, unless he is currently running the country or trapped under heavy machinery, a man who wants to speak to you will always find a way. This distance you are trying to decode is not a byproduct of a chaotic schedule, it is a calculated maneuver. What you are experiencing is not a tragic twist of fate, but rather a subtle psychological tool designed to recalibrate your entire relationship. When a man suddenly withdraws, deploying intermittent silence like a weapon, he is not taking time to figure out his feelings for you. He is actively trying to figure out exactly how much of his absence you are willing to tolerate. It is a silent negotiation where he is lowering the asking price of his presence. By vanishing and returning at his leisure, he chips away at your confidence, watching to see if your boundaries will crumble under the weight of your own anxiety. Think of it as a rather insidious stress test. When he goes quiet from Thursday evening until Sunday morning, he is meticulously observing your reaction. Will you send that double text, offering a polite, just checking in, that reeks of desperation? Will you confront him, thereby giving him the satisfaction of knowing he controls your emotional weather? If you find yourself pacing the floor, crafting the perfect understanding reply while your tea goes completely cold, congratulations. You are passing his test, but miserably failing your own. He is learning that his absolute minimum effort still secures your maximum emotional investment. This behavior has absolutely nothing to do with his alleged fear of commitment or his deep-seated childhood traumas, no matter how poetically he might have described them over a glass of wine on your second date. It is simply about control. By keeping you in a perpetual state of waiting, he effectively monopolizes your mental real estate without having to pay the rent. You become so consumed by the mystery of his silence that you completely forget to ask yourself whether this ghosting act is actually worthy of a woman of your caliber. You are busy playing armchair psychologist for a man who is treating you like a convenient option. The truly brilliant, albeit cruel part of this dynamic is what happens when he finally decides to reappear. Just as you reach the end of your tether, ready to delete his number and go enjoy a magnificent evening out, your phone will inevitably vibrate with a casual message that momentarily pauses your heartbeat. You might think this sudden return is a sign of his lingering affection or a profound realization of your worth. However, this is precisely where the trap snaps entirely shut, rewiring your brain in a way that feels dangerously like romance, but is actually something far more sinister. When that little notification finally pops up on your screen, perhaps a wholly uninspired "Hey you" or a random meme sent at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, your brain does not immediately register the sheer audacity of his laziness. Instead, it floods your system with a massive, intoxicating hit of dopamine. This, my dear, is the classic Pavlovian pull in action, and you are unwittingly playing the lead role. After days of radio silence, staring at the ceiling and wondering what on earth you did wrong, that tiny crumb of attention feels like an absolute feast. You experience a profound physical rush of relief, and the tragic irony is that you are completely mistaking this chemical alleviation of anxiety for genuine, sweeping passion. It is the exact same psychological principle, known as intermittent reinforcement, that keeps gamblers hopelessly tethered to slot machines in a casino. If you won the jackpot every single time, you would quickly grow bored. If you lost every time, you would sensibly walk away. But the unpredictability, the agonizing fact that his attention might come today, tomorrow, or perhaps next weekend creates a highly addictive emotional loop. He is dealing out his affection on a strictly randomized schedule, keeping you permanently on edge. Let me be brutally honest with you. You are not deeply in love with this man, you are simply addicted to the intermittent reinforcement of his utterly mediocre presence. Think about it in practical terms. If a perfectly pleasant chap you weren't particularly invested in disappeared for 5 days and then returned with a single emoji, you would likely roll your eyes, archive the chat, and go back to reading your book with a glass of Shiraz. But because he has conditioned you with this exhausting emotional roller coaster, you analyze his solitary emoji as if it were a cryptic love letter penned by Shakespeare himself. You dissect the timing, the lack of punctuation, searching for hidden depths, and expending a wealth of intellectual energy on a man who could not even be bothered to type a complete sentence. This cycle deliberately forces your nervous system into a relentless overdrive. You are living in a constant, humming state of fight or flight, desperately waiting for that next digital breadcrumb to prove you still hold some value in his life. It is a profoundly exhausting way to exist, treating a grown man's basic foundational communication as if it were a rare and precious commodity to be earned. I need you to realize that this intense, gut-wrenching longing you feel when he is absent is not a testament to a once-in-a-lifetime soulmate connection. It is merely the withdrawal symptom of a very deliberate, albeit rather unrefined, psychological game. And here's the most devastating consequence of this little experiment he is running on you. As you become increasingly grateful for these sporadic, low-effort returns, your internal standard of what actually constitutes a relationship begins to quietly, silently plummet. Without you even noticing the shift in the tectonic plates, he is fundamentally altering the rules of engagement. You begin to celebrate the exact sort of behavior you would have fiercely scoffed at on day one, slowly finding yourself in a rather dangerous position where his absolute worst is becoming your new normal. Let us take a brief stroll down memory lane to the beginning of this little courtship. In those early days, he likely brought out the heavy artillery, planning proper dates, securing reservations at that dreadful fusion restaurant you wanted to try, and engaging in actual, stimulating conversations. He demonstrated effort because he understood that a woman of your standard required it to even glance in his direction. However, as the calculated distance began to creep in, a rather insidious shift occurred. The grand gestures quietly evaporated, replaced by a communication style so remarkably lazy it is almost impressive.
This is the true genius of his conditioning strategy. He is methodically training you to expect profoundly less whilst feeling absurdly grateful for it. By starving you of consistent attention, he has effectively lowered the bar to a subterranean level. A few months ago, you would have rightly demanded a solid weekend plan. Now you are positively thrilled to receive a low-effort "miss you" on a dreary Tuesday afternoon. He has fundamentally altered your baseline of acceptable behavior. You have been adroitly manipulated into accepting the barest minimum of effort, treating absolute crumbs as if they were a Michelin-starred meal. Consider how your routines have slowly morphed under this new, utterly impoverished regime. Instead of him booking tickets to an exhibition or asking you out for a proper Sunday roast, your interactions have dwindled to reactive last-minute digital nudges. When he finally sends that solitary meme after a week of complete silence, your instinct should be to raise an elegant eyebrow and carry on watering your plants. Instead, you find yourself replying instantly, inadvertently rewarding his sheer laziness. You are doing all the heavy emotional lifting, whilst he is merely tossing a coin into the fountain and watching you dive in to retrieve it. I need you to be brutally honest with yourself about how this actually translates in the real world. You are an intelligent, high-value woman, yet you are currently negotiating your worth with a man who firmly believes that liking your Instagram story constitutes relationship maintenance. He no longer needs to invest time, energy, or emotional vulnerability because you have inadvertently proven that his absolute absence makes his mediocre presence entirely acceptable. He has successfully domesticated your expectations to the point where simply not ghosting you is viewed as a romantic triumph. The tragic irony is that you are probably aware, on some subconscious level, that this behavior is deeply unacceptable. Yet, instead of pouring yourself a gin and tonic and blocking his number with quiet dignity, you do something entirely counterproductive. You dive headfirst into your own vast reserves of female compassion, attempting to rationalize the irrational. You begin to weave intricate, tragic backstories to explain away his appalling lack of effort, convincing yourself that he is not actually selfish, but simply broken. And it is exactly this misplaced high-caliber empathy that becomes the very weapon used to keep you firmly in your place.
As a high-value woman, your capacity for profound empathy is undoubtedly one of your most beautiful traits. However, in the rather perilous arena of modern dating, this exact virtue is frequently weaponized against you. When faced with his sudden, inexplicable disappearance, your immediate instinct is not to hold him strictly accountable, but to play the benevolent therapist. You convince yourself that his silence is a tragic byproduct of his immensely stressful career, a recent family drama, or perhaps that unresolved childhood trauma he conveniently hinted at over drinks on your first date. Let us inject a necessary dose of brutal reality into this romanticized narrative, shall we? You are sitting there agonizing over whether you should send a supportive, carefully worded message to soothe his allegedly tortured soul. Meanwhile, he is perfectly capable of playing FIFA with his mates, ordering takeaway, and entirely ignoring his phone. You are treating his emotional unavailability as a highly complex psychological puzzle that only your infinite understanding can solve. But darling, he is not a misunderstood Victorian poet brooding on the moors. He is simply a man who lacks the basic manners to send a text. This is what I call the empathy trap, and it is utterly devastating to your own self-worth. By constantly manufacturing sophisticated excuses for his appalling behavior, you are effectively acting as his personal public relations manager entirely free of charge.
He does not even need to concoct an elaborate lie about why he vanished from Thursday to Sunday, because he knows you have already drafted a perfectly reasonable, compassionate explanation in your own mind. Your immense emotional intelligence is actively shielding him from the very real consequences of his laziness. You must realize that pouring your high-grade empathy into a man who offers the absolute bare minimum is akin to diligently watering a plastic plant. It is exhausting, completely futile, and a terrible waste of premium resources. You are not loving him as he presents himself in reality, but rather falling for the glittering potential of who he might become if only he were healed. Yet his consistent actions dictate quite clearly that he has absolutely no intention of changing, precisely because your boundless understanding makes it incredibly comfortable for him to remain exactly as he is. As long as you continue to play the role of the endlessly forgiving sanctuary, he will carry on treating you like a delightful low-maintenance convenience. You cannot simply love a man into respecting you, nor can you understand your way out of being fundamentally taken for granted. To break this profoundly draining dynamic, you must abruptly switch off the tap of your misplaced empathy and entirely rewrite the rules of engagement. It is time to step firmly behind the velvet rope and show him exactly what happens when your emotional safety net is completely removed. It is time to introduce you to a concept I like to call the velvet rope reset. If you are managing a highly exclusive premium establishment, you do not simply leave the front door wide open for any bloke who fancies a casual wander inside, do you? Your time, energy, and emotional bandwidth are strictly VIP access only, and it is high time you started acting like the formidable bouncer of your own life. To break this deeply exhausting cycle, you must immediately cease rewarding his glaring inconsistency. You are effectively closing the doors, pulling the velvet rope firmly across, and demanding that if he wishes to participate in your life, he must actually meet the entrance requirements. The protocol for this reset relies entirely on the absolute, devastating power of your non-reaction. When he inevitably resurfaces after a 4-day vanishing act with a spectacularly uninspired, "Hey, how's your week?" your immediate instinct might be to fire back a sharp, sarcastic paragraph or demand a thorough explanation. Do not give him the satisfaction, darling. Anger, frustration, and even polite sarcasm are still forms of emotional investment. They prove he can still successfully push your buttons. Instead, you must offer him the profound, deafening silence of a woman who is entirely unbothered by his mediocre attempts at communication. Let us be intensely practical about this, shall we? When that lackluster message lights up your phone on a Saturday evening, absolutely do not sit there staring at the screen analyzing his intentions with your girlfriends. Put the device in a drawer, completely out of sight. Go and run a hot, luxurious bath. Pour yourself a generous glass of a rather good Rioja and get lost in a brilliant novel. Let his message sit in the digital abyss, completely unread and gloriously ignored. You are actively demonstrating, rather than merely stating, that you have a rich, fascinating life that simply does not stop to accommodate his erratic schedule. By removing your emotional safety net, you forcefully shift the entire power dynamic back into your favor. You are no longer the anxious girl waiting by the telephone. You are the prize that requires genuine, sustained effort to attain. If he truly wants your attention, he will quickly realize that his bare minimum currency is no longer accepted at your establishment. He will be forced to revert to the high-effort behavior he displayed in the very beginning, planning proper dates and initiating meaningful conversations, or he will simply fade away, saving you a great deal of wasted time and dreadful boredom. This strategic withdrawal is not a manipulative game. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation and boundary setting. When you strip away the anxiety and replace it with elegant, icy detachment, you become an entirely different proposition in the eyes of any man. You are no longer a convenient option, but a formidable challenge that inherently commands respect. Mastering this art of total emotional control is the only way to escape the bare minimum trap, preparing you perfectly for the definitive rule that governs all successful romantic power dynamics.
So, my dear, the next time he decides to grace you with a half-hearted late-night message after days of absolute silence, I want you to remember exactly who controls the velvet rope. But tell me, I am genuinely curious, what is the most utterly absurd excuse a man has ever given you for his sudden disappearance? Do share it in the comments below. I assure you, reading through them will be a rather entertaining exercise in collective feminine wisdom. If you are quite finished settling for the bare minimum and are ready to truly master the fascinating psychology of relationships, I highly suggest you subscribe to Destiny's Decree. Ring that little notification bell so you never miss a premium lesson in reclaiming your romantic leverage. Until next time, keep your standards impeccably high and your text replies delightfully scarce.